Hey, Amigos Fam, welcome back. We are here with another episode, and it is Danny Dugan here, just checking in with a cup of coffee and ready to chat with my friend Craig today. So Craig, I would love to give the Amigos family a little introduction, and then you can share it with us as well. Craig and I met years and years ago, and I'll tell that story in a second here. But Craig has been serving on our board of directors for years. He has been a great mentor for me, a true servant leader in all that he does. He has been with Amigos for years and seen all of the growth that we have had. And most recently, we spent a week together in Nicaragua, which is what we're going to chat about here. But just to paint a little picture of how Craig and I met years ago, it was 2011, I believe. So about 14 years ago. And Craig and his family and friends were coming in on the late shift. So they had the late bus to Managua, from Managua to Chinandega. And at the time, I was serving on our team, but as an intern. So I was there for the summer. And, you know, I'm sure the team said, all right, who can stay up late and greet these guys? And my name got drawn, and so I was able to greet the crew from Canada at the wee hours of the morning. And who would have thought all these years later that we would have so many weeks spent together, so many convos spent together. But Craig, thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing a bit today, and would love for you to introduce yourself to the Amigos crew who's listening.
Your hair still looks good, Danny, but your hair was a little different back in 2011 is my recollection.
It was longer, curlier, and much higher.
Yes. Yeah, things have gone full circle for sure. Well, my introduction to Amigos starts with John Bland way back in the 80s. When were you born, Danny?
I was born in 92.
Oh my gosh. So John and I worked for the U.S. subsidiary of this insurance company in Atlanta, Georgia. And he and I met. We worked in different departments. John was in IT and I was in finance, but we worked for this insurance company. John wasn't wearing a baseball cap backwards or an old beat-up sleeveless Georgia Tech T-shirt at that point in time. He was actually reasonably respectable, is my recollection. And so we played on the company sports teams, and that's really how we got to know each other. And I developed this strong impression of John being just a terrific person and highly trustworthy. That may sound odd. How would you pick that up from playing on a sports team with somebody? But we also played in this tennis league, and John and I had these battles on the tennis court. We're very evenly matched, is my recollection. And John, I felt like, was almost overly honest in our matches. And that's a small thing, but it stayed with me for a long time. So fast forward into our careers, and lives have gone in different directions, and it's the early 2000s. And a mutual friend, he had actually been John's roommate at Georgia Tech, and a fellow who I had worked with in the investment business, told me that John had founded and started Amigos for Christ, and said he knew that my wife and I were sort of inclined in that type of direction. And he said, you should call John and find out what he's up to with Amigos. And so I called John in the early 2000s, 2003, 2004, and heard about what Amigos was doing. I thought it sounded fantastic, and we absolutely would be a part of that. And so my recollection is we started maybe with some funding at El Chonco, maybe for an oven or refurbishing the school, or there's a kind of an outdoor cafeteria there. I think we might have been involved with that. And we started sponsoring students, and we loved what Amigos was doing, but we were really cheering from the sidelines. And it wasn't until, as you highlighted, 2011, that we actually went to Chinandega, a group of us. And as is often the case, it's an all-day affair to get there. And when we walked into Casablanca, who do we see first? A young Danny Dugan
Yep.
And that was our first mission trip. We loved it. There was a lot of exciting things that happened on that trip. There was two fellows from Atlanta, Chip and Pete, that brought down all these bicycles. And there was this crazy bike race we had out in one of the communities, where I recall I was the only gringo in the bike race, and somehow survived it. But that really started our introduction to visiting Chinandega, and we got a deeper appreciation of Amigos. And my wife Cindy and I went back with our two older children several times. And then in 2018, I was wrapping up my career. I was retiring, and John said, well, would you join the Amigos board? And I said, sure, I'd be happy to. John, I'd be honored. And he said, well, would you be the president? And I said, well, that's not really the way it's supposed to work. But after some coercion, I agreed to that position. And of course, it was a real honor to be on the Amigos board. And I really have gone back every year since. I was in 2018, with the exception of the COVID years. And, we've just loved being a part of Amigos, and I'm always impressed. And I would say my thoughts on Amigos continue to expand, and it's just amazing what the organization has been able to accomplish. So very pleased to be here. So thank you for the invitation, Danny.
Oh, thank you, Craig. Knowing your track record of seeing lots of growth over these years and being involved, basically from the very beginning, I'd love for you to share with everyone listening maybe some of the most significant ways Amigos has grown, or some of the most significant ways Amigos has evolved over all these years to be where we're at and working how we're working now.
Well, in the time frame that I've been closest to Amigos, which is since 2018, there's a couple ways to answer that. One is just the size of the employee force. When I joined in 2018, I would venture to guess there were less than 100 Amigos employees.
Yeah.
And today we have probably 230-ish.
Yep.
So the growth has been quite dramatic. And that's all been a function of opportunity and expansion of what we do. And that would be a second way to think about this. So the employee force has really expanded, which is amazing in and of itself, just to create jobs in Chinandega for Amigos employees. I mentioned the opportunities. In 2018, we might have just been breaking ground on the academy, but now we have this, I would say one of a kind school in Chinandega that we did not have 6-7 years ago. We have a baseball program that we certainly didn't have in 2018. I'm going to guess that the baseball program is probably 5 years old. We didn't have business for transformation, which is our endeavor to work with farmers and raise their crop yields, and thereby their ability to have a better life for them and their families. We didn't have the sense of volunteering out in the Nicaraguan communities. So when COVID came along, and the mission groups really stopped visiting Chinandega, the U.S. airlines were no longer flying. We really had to adapt. And lo and behold, we were able to sort of create an environment where the communities that we had worked with, many of those people then started to serve other communities. And additionally, young people in the communities. I think this is where, the reputation of Amigos has really grown in Chinandega over time. Young people wanted to be a part of Amigos. And I was going on mission trips. Young people were showing up and just volunteering for free. So in all these ways, Business for Transformation, the baseball program, volunteering, on and on, the eye clinic, this amazing one-of-a-kind eye clinic that we have, those are all new endeavors. And as we've gotten better and better in our ability to bring fresh water to communities and in our community development efforts, we've also added on these other aspects of Amigos. And of course, it's never perfect and it's never easy and we make mistakes, but the growth there has been quite impressive. So on this vision trip we just had, the breadth of what we're doing is really quite extensive and eye-opening at this point.
For everyone listening, referencing the vision trip, just to give a little description and kind of some insight on what it is, we take a week. It's 1 week each year, and we do a different type of trips. Normally we're on a mission trip, and so we're going and we're serving families directly through one of our programs. This vision trip is really to invite others to come in, others to join us. Our board of directors hosts alongside the Amigos team, to invite folks in who want to see what's going on behind the scenes, kind of peel back a few layers, and then to also have us share the vision of what's to come in the years coming up. So that's just a little insight on what the vision trip was, and we'll get into more of that in a second. But I just wanted to let everyone know what the vision trip was. Craig, I would love to hear. I know this is it's a hard question to ask, and it's a hard answer to answer. Do you have a favorite moment, or one of your favorite moments or experiences over all these years that you could share with us? A favorite memory with Amigos?
The parents out there listening probably will easily relate to this. Is that anytime you bring a child or on one of these trips, I think you're often astounded at the impact. Our two older children, when they came, there was no doubt in my mind that they would love the experience. Our youngest daughter, Kyle, came down in 2023. She was a teenager. She came with her good friend, Gaby. And, where we live, it's a little bit of a bubble. And a big challenge for parents is perspective, good perspective for the children here. And Kyle's grown up in kind of a bubble, and in spite of our best efforts. And so when I took Kyle and Gaby down in 2023, I had high hopes, but they were shaky, to be honest with you. And I wasn't sure if they were going to get a lot out of this. And to my surprise, the two of them were up each morning by 6 a.m. up on the veranda in the back of the complex, watching the sunrise and writing in their diaries, unprompted. We went out into the communities, and they worked as hard as anybody else, digging a trench for a septic tank. And I remember you were part of that, Danny, and I think who else? Ruth and Jaime.
Yep.
Joined us, and we climbed Cerro Negro, and so Kyle and Gaby flew up the face of Cerro Negro. And
yeah, I think I followed them by like 45 minutes.
I think we all did. It was shocking how quick they were. And after that climb, we're in maybe the ambulance or one of the vehicles, and you asked them what they thought of the trip so far. And they both said it was the best trip they had ever been on, which was overwhelming. It wildly surpassed my highest expectations. And I just thought, wow, that's really about as good as it gets as a parent. So that would be my vote.
I love that. I love that I got to share that moment too. I remember it. We were on those rocky Cerro Negro roads, going back out towards Leon and asking that. It was it was a moment that has stuck with me always too. And just shows, for Kyle and for any other young person, for Gaby, the vision that it opens up of what, the world looks like, perspective, as you said, is really, really incredible. And we're lucky to be able to serve youngsters who come on mission trips with us, and, will go and make the world a better place in their own ways as they, go off to school and start their careers and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So to get back to
Kyle, Danny, Kyle, just to complete the circle on that, Kyle was just offered a kind of a summer intern spot with Amigos. So, so it's parlayed from my shaky hope into something quite much greater. So
it just goes to show that we will always be astounded, and especially when it comes to these experiences, that they'll be beyond our wildest imagination and dreams. That's really cool. We'll make sure to put Kyle on the lake crew one night as well. Just like we welcomed the Merrigan crew years ago, she can jump in and welcome some folks as well.
Part of the initiation.
Exactly. So, I know we've mentioned our vision trip a couple of times. That's the week that Craig and I just shared together with about 35 other people. As I said, to kind of peel back the layers of all of what's going on, get a behind the scenes look, and then also really to cast vision for what the future looks like and the dreams that we have, and how our team is hoping to continue to transform life in Nicaragua. And so, Craig, I would love to hear from you. Something that stuck out, something that impacted you, something that you carried with you from our time on the vision trip.
It's very hard to pick one thing, Danny. So I may have to pick a couple.
Pick a couple, yeah.
Well, we had a terrific group of people. You mentioned it was about 35 people from all over the U.S., from San Jose through the Midwest, Texas, Louisiana, Georgia, and South Carolina were very well represented. Long Island. We even had a couple Canadians that actually so Tessa's sister and her husband Nick that actually live pretty close to me here. So it's a great cross section of people, and which was really fun to to kind of get to know them. We're really spending 3 to 5 days together, but in close proximity and experiencing a lot of amazing things. So here's a couple. There was so many of you know, of course, Morgan, and the pastor of her church, also named Craig.
Yep.
He told the story on the final night. His congregation had supported, I believe, basically the breakfasts and lunches out at the academy, this amazing school that we have there. And when we went out and visited the school on that Tuesday, we just had this wonderful, you have to sort of see it to fully appreciate it. But part of it was we sat down and had lunch with all the kids in this beautiful open air kind of cafeteria. We're surrounded by them, lots of joy and excitement. And, he's telling this story, and he was kind of overcome by the fact that his congregation in Omaha was buying all these breakfasts and lunches, and here he is sitting in the middle of Chinandega surrounded by these children eating that food. And he was quite emotional. And then he told the story about it being, he has a small church. He doesn't have a big, a church with lots and lots of resources. And he got kind of quiet. And then he said, I really think that our church could do this. And I'm not going to say the exact terms because I don't want to hold him to it. And it's not my story. It's his story. But it was an extraordinary sort of amount that he thought he could raise. So the school right now is kindergarten through 6th grade, and the idea is to keep going. And in the next year, we plan to open a grade each year. Each grade is approximately $250,000. And then, of course, from there, so that would take us through high school, and then from there to turn it into a university ultimately. And again, it's a one-of-a-kind school. So he basically said he thought his small congregation could come up with, I'll say, X, which was just extraordinary. It was basically kind of a mic drop moment. We were all kind of stunned, to be honest with you. So that sticks with me for sure. Another thing that sticks with me, and there are many, we went out to Miguel Cristiano, the community, on, I think it was Monday.
Yeah.
And Miguel Cristiano is one of the communities that, through our Plan 7 community development efforts, we're now graduating communities. So we've worked alongside them for 7 years. And then we've basically handed them the keys. They have the tools basically to carry forward. And we feel confident that that they will be able to build on what we have done together. So we spent this beautiful day in Miguel Cristiano, and we went around, we made 5 stops basically, and each representing one of our initiatives. So we talked to the couple. Actually, it was the woman of the house, where she and her husband drank Coca-Cola all the time, and that led to various health problems. And we had to work very hard to get them to consider to drink water, which of course is ultimately we were successful, and their health is dramatically improved. And we met the young woman who was this wonderful entrepreneur in terms of our business development efforts. And we visited with a mother and an aunt of 2 scholarship students, which was also quite wonderful. But the thing that really stood out for me was we visited in the home of the leader of the community, and this was the stop on leadership. And the gentleman there told us that before Amigos came along, the community was, I think the way he put it was, weak and scattered. And at the end of the 7-year process, now that they've graduated, he said that they were strong and connected. The year before, we had gone to see, on the similar trip, we'd gone to La Danta. And there was a woman who got up, who was one of the community leaders, that used almost the exact same language to talk about the community before Amigos came along and after Amigos was there. And that to me was, in terms of being able to really, transform is a word that perhaps is overused. But in this case, I think it's quite appropriate, actually. And you could sort of see it in action, and you could feel it from the way the leaders of these communities described what had taken place. It wasn't just simply that they had gotten a fresh, a modern bathroom, and they had clean water, and they'd learned healthier habits. But the fact that the community actually became stronger together, that part I had not quite appreciated to that extent before. And so I thought that was very, very powerful. One thing I wanted to mention along those lines was, so 2 years ago, I was in a bus and I was riding with Walter. Yeah. And our mission at Amigos is to serve and make Christ more visible. And I always thought, that is a fantastic mission, and I love that mission. But it also seems kind of high-minded, if you will. And I remember saying to Walter, help me with this, Walter, because I think of Nicaragua as a very religious country. Isn't Christ already quite visible in Nicaragua? And what he said was, well, actually, because the people are so poor in general and have so little, their hope is very low, and therefore their faith is very low. And what happens is when Amigos goes into a community, they feel like their prayers have finally been heard and answered in the persona of Amigos for Christ. And so this idea of making Christ more visible, when he explained it that way, others probably get that right off the bat, but that explanation really rung with me. And it kind of jives with what this gentleman was saying about what happened in their community after we had been there alongside them for 7 years.
Craig, thank you so much for sharing that. I think about, Don Ponce, who was the one who was sharing that story of, being weak and not connected, scattered. What a word, to becoming strong and connected. And ultimately, I think if anyone's kind of thinking right now, well, how does that happen? It's just human connection. It's deciding to walk alongside each other day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, for 7 straight years, to get to a point where we almost kind of, and the image that I have is, you almost are kind of like holding up a mirror to somebody and say, hey, this is you. Hey, this is your potential and this is what you can do. And then you kind of take a step back, and a few people see how them coming together in that mirror of, wow, we are strong and we are connected and there is a great future. So thank you for so eloquently sharing his story, providing hope of good things are happening through us coming together. Ultimately, Juntos. I know we talk about Juntos a lot, but ultimately that's what happens when Juntos happens.
Exactly.
Craig, I know it's unfair because I ask a couple questions of give us one thing, or, so feel free if you want to share a couple things here, you can, but you mentioned the word hope, and I would love, I think hope is so crucial always. I think hope is crucial in the work that we're doing, to be able to see, kind of what can be, and that, the best is yet to come in a lot of ways. Is there anything going on in Amigos right now, or that we've talked about in the future vision that we have, that just makes you, gives you an extra special dose of hope, or makes you particularly hopeful?
Well, the not to be too nerdy or businesslike here, but I'm a fan of Jim Collins. Jim Collins was a great business analyst, and he wrote some books, Built to Last and Good to Great. He actually wrote Good to Great in the social sector, and he said that the biggest key to success is having the right people on the bus. And so I'll start there. When I look at Amigos, we went through you sort of look at the challenges of the last 6 or 7 years. Now, if you looked at Amigos' results and financials, remarkably, amazingly, you would never know that the challenges were there, which is just a huge credit to Amigos. But of course, we have had challenges, and one is the CEO succession. And so along about 2021, John decided that he was going to step aside as CEO, and the board basically conducted a process of coming up with the next CEO. And of course, that's turned out to be Kristen. And I think she is a fabulous choice. So the key for any organization, and the key for a board, the board has supposedly 10 sort of major responsibilities, but they all pale in comparison next to have the right leader, have the right CEO. So I feel very, very good about how that transition happened, and having Kristen as the CEO. I'm also thrilled for John, and I think it's very important for John and Sabrina to still be a part of Amigos. And I love that John's tackling business for transformation, which is a very, very challenging assignment. But if anybody can handle it, he can.
Damn, yeah.
we have an unsung hero in all that we do is Mauricio, and he is our legal representative in Nicaragua. And he is a very, very talented, impressive person. And, the scrutiny of operating in Nicaragua is very high. And so having him and his team there is a huge positive for us. We just named Mary Earling as the country leader, country director. And I do think she's the people's choice within Amigos, and she's very, very capable. I love what you and Scott are doing in the United States, and I could go on and on. But my point is, I think we have the right people on the bus. Then continuing, we're getting better and better at water and bathrooms. We are very, very good in our community development. We talked about Plan 7 and our experience at La Donta and Miguel Cristiano. We're not perfect, but I think we've really got that. In education, I think the big challenge and the opportunity for Amigos going forward, and I'm very hopeful, in fact, confident. I think education is a very big part of that. And that was probably maybe a bigger part of this vision trip. There were people on this vision trip that knew about water and knew about community development, but maybe didn't fully appreciate what we're doing in education. Well, the school is a one-of-a-kind school, and we're going to keep going with that. I can't imagine that there's any other school in Nicaragua like this one. And we have about 220 students. Mm-hmm. And I'll call it the multiplier effect. When you go out to the school, each of the younger children has an older child who is sort of mentoring them, if you will. So you've got the multiplier effect there. We're going to keep adding grades to this school, so there's a multiplier effect. And I think teachers from other schools will have the opportunity to come in and learn sort of best teaching practices.
Absolutely.
So that's one aspect of education. A second is this baseball program, which is relatively new, but in the space of 5 years has made sort of dramatic progress. We've had two, thanks to Louise, who's heading this up, we've had 2 national championship teams in a baseball crazy country, one of which almost made it to the Little League World Series, is just remarkable. That in and of itself is quite an achievement, but a big part of this baseball program is personal development and staying in school, getting the right grades, having the right attitude. The boys pray before and after every game. So we're really trying to develop good citizens. So this baseball program, I'll call a one-of-a-kind baseball program. And the older kids can mentor the younger ones and eventually, if they're interested, become coaches themselves, and we can expand. So again, I'll call it the multiplier effect. Then we have this scholarship program. Cindy and I have been involved in this for a long time. We're up to about 220 or so young people in this scholarship program. When we were in Miguel Cristiano and we visited with the mother and the aunt of 2 of the scholarship students in the community, they were rightfully thrilled with what those scholarships had meant for their children. But almost more importantly, they talked about the other 80 to 90 kids in the community that look at the scholarship students and say, hey, we have a chance to do this too. And so they have these amazing role models, and the bar of what's possible has been lifted. And we continue to grow this scholarship program. Part of the scholarship agreement is there has to be mentorship, and you have to give back to the community. So again, there's kind of a multiplier effect in the scholarship program. So if Amigos is going to have a bright future, and I believe it will, the education aspect of it has to be right in the center of that. Dovetailing off that, the culture of Amigos is central to us being a wonderful organization for the long term. And I do think an underappreciated aspect of what we're doing here is that approximately half of the Amigos employees were scholarship students.
Yeah.
And so we have this wonderful testing lab, if you will, with all these young people of observing and watching, all the things you would look for as an employer. How coachable are they? What's their work ethic like? How capable are they? How do they treat the people around them? And for those that are inclined, and I think Amigos has sort of developed a reputation as being sort of an ideal employer, we have the ability to take many of our terrific young people and bring them into the Amigos organization, and thereby have a much higher than average chance of keeping the culture intact. And so for all these reasons and more, but I'm sort of carrying on too long here, I'm quite optimistic about the future of Amigos. But as Kristen said on the last night, it requires investment. And so she said, we need investment and we need friends.
Yep.
So inviting more people to come on mission trips and spreading the word and thinking of Amigos as a long-term investment, I think is very, very important. And I'll just say on that point, I had a career in investments, and I love to invest and for the long term. But I would say that an investment in the young people in Amigos and this rare, amazing organization, when I think about it, it's the absolute best investment that my wife and I could make.
Thank you, Craig, for sharing that. Thank you for sharing, all of what you shared. And I think thinking about the future, ultimately that is where where the hope is coming from, of who are the youngsters that are out there right now that are looking up to all the team members that you mentioned, and they're ultimately thinking, I want to be like you when I grow up. And we know we're not perfect, and we know that we learn trial by error, but it is a beautiful thing, as you said, having that multiplier effect of having people who have kind of made it a bit in life and are figuring out their stage now that say, hey, if I can do it, you can do it, and have that happen over and over and over again. So thank you. And I'm excited to see what the future holds. I know we'll be chatting under the rancho, or we'll be chatting up at your house, or when you come and visit us down south here, and we will continue to reflect on all the good stuff that's happening exactly through that multiplier effect.
Well, Danny, thanks for having me on. It was a pleasure, and I'm so glad we ran into each other at Casablanca all those years ago. We're still connected.
Yeah. So Amigos family, I would love for us just to kind of take a moment and reflect on some of what we have talked about from that intro back in Casablanca, which is where it was our Amigos complex before we had our Amigos complex. And just thinking through, Craig, some of what you shared. Thank you for sharing about your trip with Kyle to go and see everything in Nicaragua, and especially her reflection on it being the best trip she'd ever taken. That is so encouraging. Thank you for sharing that. From sharing all of what we saw on the vision trip, of the goodness, it sticks with me, that part of, Don Ponce talking about being connected, being strong and being connected. And then ultimately what you shared about this multiplier effect. There are such good things happening. And as for everyone who's listening right now, all of that is happening because of you and because of your investment, as Craig talked about, the way that you love Amigos, the way that you care about people in Nicaragua. So Amigos family, I want to say thank you, and that wherever you are right now, whether you are on a walk or a jog, whether you're driving your car, whether you are at work or you are hanging with friends and family, we just want to say thank you. Thank you for being a part of the Amigos family and for feeling the transformation that we get to be a part of day in and day out. So Amigos family, we will catch you next time. And Craig, thank you again for joining us on our episode today.
Thank you, Danny.